Today you are going to be finding the slope of a line. So the first thing we are going to do is finding the slope from 2 points. So the first thing you need to understand is what is slope. So this should have been something that you looked at in middle school. So you might have heard the term rise over run. So how much it goes up or down over how many it goes side to side. Or really that's saying how steep a line is. When you're given 2 points, you're given x coordinates and y coordinates, and we're going to use those to find your slope. When you are given your points, we're going to label them so that you can match your x's up together and match your y's together, and then you're going to subtract them. The special cases you should find out for is if it's 0 or undefined. So if it's 0, the 0 is going to be on top. If it's undefined, your 0 is on the bottom. So if it's undefined, your 0 is on the bottom. If it's undefined, your line is going to be straight up and down. And if it is 0, your line is going to be side to side. So if it's 0, you'll have a 0 on top. And your line will be straight side to side. So we'll kind of look more at what that looks like. So the first thing that I want you to do when you are given 2 points, you're going to label them x1 and y1, because that's the first point and you have an x and a y. And then you have an x2 and a y2, because that's the x and y from your second point. So when you have a slope, you take their y's and subtract them, and you take your x's and subtract them. So the actual slope formula is y2 minus y1 on top and x2 minus x1 on the bottom. And m is just another way to say slope. So my y2 that I have over here, and my y2 I have right here from my point, I'm going to take that 16 from my point and I'm going to plug it into my formula. So instead of y2, I have the number 16. Then I have a minus, and instead of y1, I have the number 8 from my first point. On the bottom, I have x2, so I take that from my second point. That's 9, minus my x1, which comes from my first point, which is 3. When you simplify this, you simplify the top first. So I can take 16 minus 8 on top, and that gives me 8. And take 9 minus 3 on the bottom, which gives me 6. Once you get your fraction, you need to try to simplify it. So find a number that divides both 8 and 6 at the same time. So the same number. So the number that divides 8 and 6 is 2. So we're going to reduce the fraction by 2. Take 8 divided by 2, and that gives me 4. And take 6 divided by 2, and that gives me 3. My slope is 4 over 3. my next point is 1, negative 19, and negative 2, negative 19. So label your point x1, y1, x2, y2. I'm going to write my slope formula again. And I'm going to take my points and my numbers and plug them in. So y2 is negative 19. Then I have a minus in the middle. And then my y1 is negative 19. On my bottom, I have x2, which is negative 2, minus x1, which is 1. On the top, I have a minus negative. So remember, when you have a minus negative, that turns to a positive. And this becomes negative 19 plus 19, which gives me 0. And on the bottom, I have negative 2 minus 1, which gives me negative 3. When you have a 0 on top, your whole thing becomes 0. So if I were to take 0 divided by negative 3 and put it into my calculator, it gives me just 0. So remember, this is one of our special cases. On a graph, this would look like a horizontal line. Number 3, label your point x1, y1, and your second point x2, y2. And then plug them in. My y2 is negative 15 minus, I labeled that one wrong, x1, y1. There we go. So my y2 is negative 15 minus my y1 is 0. On the bottom, I have x2, which is 3, minus x1, which is 3. Subtract the top, so negative 15 minus 0 gives me negative 15. On the bottom, 3 minus 3 gives me 0. If you were to plug this into your calculator, and I were to take negative 15 divided by 0, it would, in your calculator, give you an error. This is because your line is undefined. In math, you can never divide by 0, so it gives you an error. So if you put it into your calculator and you get an error, you know that your line is undefined. This is saying that your line is straight up and down. All right, label your points right away. x1, y1 for my first point. x2, y2 for my second point. And then I'm going to take them and plug them in. So y2 is 2 minus y1 is 20. On the bottom, I have x2, which is 12, minus x1, which is negative 18. On the top, 2 minus 20 gives me negative 18. On the bottom, I have 12 minus negative 18. Minus and negative, remember, can turn into a plus, so it becomes 12 plus 18, which gives me 30. I can simplify this fraction by finding a number that divides both of those. So the same number that divides both of those is 6. So I'm going to simplify that fraction by a 6. When I take negative 18 divided by 6, that gives me negative 3. And when I take 30 divided by 6, that gives me 5. So my slope is negative 3 over 5. So if you are given a graph, you can also find your slope. If you have your points on a graph, you can connect them with two straight lines that make a triangle. Your slope for a graph is how many you go up or down on top, and how many you go left or right on the bottom. If your slope is moving up from left to right, then your slope is going to be positive. If your slope is moving down, or your line is moving down from left to right, your slope is negative. Remember your special cases. If my line is straight side to side, my slope is 0. If my line is straight up and down, my slope is undefined. So I'm going to choose any 2 points. So I'm going to pick this point right here, and I'm going to choose the next closest point to it. So I can do either the closest one behind it or the closest one in front of it. And I'm going to connect those 2 points with straight lines. So remember, we said your slope is how many you go up or down over how many you go left or right. So to get from this first point that I chose to my second, I have to go up 1, 2. So that's the number I'm putting on top. And then on the bottom is how many I go left or right, and I have to go right 1 to get to my second point. So that's the 1 that I put on the bottom. You may recognize that 2 over 1 is also the same as 2. So either way, you can write that. My line is going up from left to right. So as I go from left to right, my line is going up. So it's going to be a positive 2. Or positive 2 over 1. On this one, I want to choose 2 nice points. So I'm going to choose this nice point right here. It crosses nice at the grid lines. And I'm going to go and find my next one that's the nicest crossing at my grid lines. And I'm going to connect those with my triangle, my straight lines. So on top of my fraction is how many I'm going up or down. To get from my first point to my second point, I have to go down 1. And I have to go right 1, 2, 3. So the 1 is on top, The 3 is on the bottom. My line is going down when I go from left to right. And if my line is going down, it makes my slope a negative 1/3. Let me know if you have any questions. That is finding slope from 2 points and finding slope from a graph.